Marcellus, get us rolling. Think
Yes.
football is the cause of Antonio Brown's behavior?
No, it's not the cause. But being a former football player, it certainly is a contributor. To what degree is a conversation we can have. My first concussion ever was not on the football field. It was on the playground. Got pushed by some gangsters, some bloods, pushed me. Next thing I know, big hole in my head, 9 stitches, concussion. Fast forward a few years, I'm on the football field, another concussion. Fast forward a few more years, another concussion. So here's the thing. After the first one, I knew that this is something that is damaging to my long-term health because it's not good for me. The second ones were voluntary because I chose to play a sport that this can be a part of the hazards. Head trauma. Now, you get into the world where AB is, where we're seeing him live and in person crash and burn. Never forget that football helped him take flight to absurd levels, to dream fantasy world levels, where we can't blame football fully for what happened to him. But as I've been through a transition from the football field to the real world, your circumstances, your conditions, your mental health comes into play. And it can be triggered by some of the contributing factors from the head trauma in football. But knowing Junior Seau, the late great, as I did personally, it's also circumstantial what's going on in your head and in your world. So I don't blame football, but certainly there is a piece of the game, the hazardous part of our game, that can set a base for some of these other issues to come from.
My issue is that the scale has been tipped in the wrong direction, because you mentioned that there's a combination of personal responsibility and culpability, and then there are the circumstances and the conditions within which you grow up, or the things that happen to you that influence who you are and what you do. We have now become a society where we place everything on the circumstance. Victimhood and victimization, and it's not my fault, losing the personal culpability for the choices that we make is no longer in vogue. It's always someone or something caused this to happen to me, particularly when it comes to people in the spotlight. We want to believe a certain thing about them, and so when they don't live up to what we want them to be, it's because of something else. I look at this situation and I look at Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown demonstrated that he made poor choices and poor decisions. His decision-making was not very good long before these recent incidents over the last year or two. I can't put that on CTE. I have to put it on how the values that he was taught, the principles, what he grew up with and believes in making his decisions. That is at the heart of all this. Even if you have issues with what's happening to you in football, you make that choice and you take your own discovery in terms of what it is doing to you in a particular situation.
I think football is the cause of it, but I'm going to spin it in a different direction. It's not from the effects of playing football. It's his divorce from football. He's not able to play football. Like, I've been concussed. I've had my helmet knocked off and then hit, and I went to sleep for about 4 minutes. And we've all had concussions. His divorce from football is causing him to lash out and just do these crazy, erratic things. He can't play. He's felt, I've been suspended without being suspended unfairly, and I'm just going to lash out and do this and do that. And what you said is 100. Without football, you sign me up for football and you tell me when I'm coming into the NFL, these are probably the consequences. You probably will have CTE. You probably can't walk. You probably can't do this. Would you still play? I'm signing 100 out of 100. I'm taking my chances. Because when you come from Section 8 in the projects and nothing, and you living off government, this is our way out. At least that was my only. School wasn't a way out for me. I didn't graduate from high school, and I've said that plenty of times on this show. School wasn't a way out. The people you look up to are the people in the streets or the guys you see on TV playing sports. Football is our way out, and I'm here because of football. You might have concussion. You might have CTE at 50 or 40. I'm taking that chance because this was my only way out.
My overall pushback is like, we 10 years ago, I would suggest, came up with CTE is the worst thing that happened in football. And it changed everybody's conversation. And then all I kept thinking about, well, hold on, man. I've been seeing Dick Butkus and I'm friends with Jim Brown, and I see all these old football players that weren't having these problems, and there was less protection for them. They played in a more violent game. And then we move it, someone says it's CTE, and now anything that goes wrong with a football player, well, it's CTE. I just reject that. Having played the game through college, having most of my friends, my best friends, having been football players at the college and some of them at the pro level, I just reject that and just go back to what Rick said in terms of the AB's issues. You can trace them all the way back to his teenage years. Long before he ever had a concussion, or maybe he had one in 8th grade, who knows? But it goes all the way back to his teenage years, and if you look at all the data about who ends up in criminal behavior and getting locked up, it's guys from dysfunctional backgrounds. A lot of the issues related to bipolarism and poor mental health stems from a dysfunctional childhood. How the way we pamper and protect kids from really, don't they say the first 5 years are probably the most important?
Yeah,
if they're not showered with that love and protect, you set them on a course that leads to self-medication and all the things that the tow truck driver said AB appeared to be high, and I believe that. I believe that part of his problems are self-medicating with drugs, but we want to go to football instead of these drugs, alcohol dependency, poor values being instilled, things like that.
Yeah, we're saying a lot here, and we can't ignore any slice of this pie. And the slice that I'm going to focus in on is the CTE because of this. We have to remember there's a physical realm that has tangibles. You can see it. It's easy to understand. And there's the mental realm, which has the intangibles, which is vague. And CTE is putting people at a disposition that right now we're going to call pretty vague in understanding its effects. But let's not confuse that from the fact that physically we all have different dispositions. TJ can eat the same thing I eat, and it's going to land on me different than it is on TJ. Just like that mentally. He may be in a disposition where triggered with the CTE, whatever level it is. It doesn't even have to be Aaron Hernandez, who had the worst CTE as 27. Allegedly, whatever the report said. The point of it is, if your disposition is at a certain heightened level, and then you were a kid who wasn't loved for only one thing, that football, and then you start to divorce that same thing that you're only adored for, now we have to say that all of this is a part of the equation. Because we found a commonality in dysfunctional families, not having both parents. That's a common denominator. And then what's a common denominator from a lot of these guys who don't transition well? Well, they all played football as well. So I'm not trying to highlight all the negative factors. I'm just trying to say, let's be clear and transparent about some of the hazards.
I just want to add in, Delonte West has had a difficult time transitioning, has some mental health issues, basketball player.
Yeah.
No one's blaming CTE.
No, and I would say at the heart of it, it's Delonte West in that he has not identified that he has an issue to deal with. I'm going to use your analogy when you talk about eating something that wouldn't bother TJ.
And you. It wouldn't bother you either.
Have an issue with you. But whose responsibility is to recognize this isn't good for me? That I shouldn't eat this because it's not good for me? Is that on the people that are offering it, that are providing it?
No.
Or is it ultimately on you or me to say, this is not good for me, therefore I need to go in another direction? I hope this doesn't come off as corny. And this is part of the advice and the guidance and the counsel that I believe that Antonio Brown is missing. Is we're not human doings, we're human beings. The idea that I cannot identify or tie myself to what it is that I do in order to get my fulfillment of who I am and what my principles are about.
Preach.
No one ever taught that to Antonio Brown.
Nope.
And so to your point, I think you're right. I think that the NFL provided a cocoon where we didn't get to see the real Antonio Brown or the issues that he had. But that's not the NFL's fault, ultimately. It's Who created the Antonio Brown that made him susceptible to, if he didn't have the NFL, he didn't have anything?
And sorry, we got to go, but the last thing I would just want to say is I don't want Antonio Brown coming out a year from now, 2 years now. Oh, it's football. I did all that crazy stuff. It was football. If it wasn't for football, you know, I would have been Larry Fitzgerald.
But what if that's proven? What if that's factual?
I just don't know.
I don't even think you can really prove that.
I don't think you can prove
That's
it.
my point. But look, let's be real. The NFL was not being forthright in telling everything about CTE for a reason.
Everybody that comes from our background would sign and take that chance and play.
But not our children. I'm not signing my son up for it. He may sign himself up for it, and I support him, but I'm not signing him.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And be sure to check out more of the best clips from Speak For Yourself, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.